How about busting down the door? Where was I in that scene?
Where were you, Jim?
Ian Cairns was staying at my house, riding around in my car with a sawed-off shotgun in the backseat. The Eddie I Cow Invitational. And of course, I know Eddie. Eddie and Clyde used to come out to the country all the time. And I know Pops, he drove a utility truck that had the doors that came up on the side. And you always knew when Eddie and Clyde were there. And we went to the same high school, right? Barton Lynch is not just a surfer.
No, by no means.
He's way more.
Jim Hayes, thank you so much.
You're more than
inviting
welcome.
us to what I can only describe as a treasure trove of surfing history.
Yeah.
In these boards, and you're not seeing maybe 10% of what's around in the rooms. Wow, when I walked in here, it was like, for me, a sensory overload.
Yeah.
And all that surfing heritage and that history just came flooding in, which made me feel so excited to chat to you.
Yeah, it's amazing when you can say that you started your surfboard business before leashes existed.
Before leashes
Before leashes. The matter of fact, the interesting quick story is the two fellas came walking into my store when I just was open a couple of months, and one had a huge black trash bag in his pocket, in his hand, and the other, we're talking Afro, bell bottoms, real hippie kind of kids. And they asked me, they said, we're starting a slipper company. Can we put some slippers in your showroom on consignment? I said, well, sure, of course, that's awesome, And I'm looking at them. They were called, whatever it was, didn't matter. Taking them out of the bag, and I'm looking at them. I go, well, sure. Well, how do we display them? Are we going to just throw them on the floor here, or you have an idea about the display? And they both looked at each other. Two brothers looked at each other and went, hey, you were supposed to think of that, right? Anyway, they went home, came back a few days later with a nice plywood cabinet, really nice, with a sign and everything, and we put the slippers in. Well, it turns out those are the two guys that started DaKine.
DaKine.
The brand DaKine.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a really cool story to kick us off with.
Yeah, it's amazing too, because we're talking about leashes, right? And they had not even conceived a leash at that point. But also windsurfing was coming into vogue. It was really, really young days. And nobody really knew what needed to be, what a windsurfer, the board itself, needed to be like. They're flat, they're like a plank, they're long, 12 feet, And I had this incredible shaper, Al Dove, and no matter what you told him, the craft you were going to build, he would conceive it. And I'll show you, as a matter of fact, there's some photos in that bio that I sent you. He came up with just really beautiful equipment. And, we started using it, and we go, well, we see other guys with foot straps. How are we going to do that? No foot strap existed at that time, right? So, we're having this conversation in the shop, and then I look over at the slipper display, and it had this beautiful rainbow colored banding on it, the webbing. And I thought, you know what, Rob probably would just sew something up for us, right? So they're on Maui by this point. So I call him up and say, Rob, you know what, we'd like to make something. It doesn't have to be fancy or movable or whatever, but if you would just sew 2 leash cups onto the ends of some kind of a strap, right? We would mount them in the board in appropriate places, and that would be our foot straps.
Wow.
We had told, Rob was coming into my store even after he had children and sold the company and whatever. And we'd laugh, reminisce, and laugh about this story. But really, that was kind of what gave him the idea to start doing something with the webbing that would be different from
Which would evolve into the leg rope.
Yeah, and the very first customer that they ever had was Mr. Ching it was actually Mr. Cami, I'm sorry, at Cami Market, right across the street from Sunset Beach.
Incredible.
So yeah, really interesting.
Let's go back to the first store that you opened
Yeah, that's
in
Kapilani Boulevard.
Ala Moana, huh?
Oh, right across from Ala Moana.
Yeah, right across from Ala Moana.
Right, and interesting, that was kind of Surfboard Row at the time.
Yeah.
We were directly across from the entrance to the Ala Moana shopping center. And so everybody else was on the other side of the street and further down the block.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, who's down there? Jerry Lopez and Lightning Bolt.
Yep.
And there were several other smaller ones that I don't really remember. I think Locomotion might have at one point put a show in down there, but they were from Kailua and they pretty much stayed over there. The Hawaiian Creations actually got a spot inside the mall. Originally, a few blocks on the other side of the Diamond Head side of the shopping center, there was a street called Kona Street, and the original shop that sold Weber surfboards and that kind of stuff. A lot of the people that got into the business later all started their careers there.
1978 was when you opened that
Right.
store, correct?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about those early days of the store and what motivated you to want to open the store in Ala Moana.
When I was supposed to be in college, and I pretended like I went there a few times to the community college, but I just really didn't want to go to school, I started a painting company. And I had, originally it was myself and my brother, and then I hired 3 or 4 more, I think I was 20 years old. I hired a couple other guys, and we started painting houses. And that's literally where the name Tropical Blends came from. There we go. The idea was to paint a house so that it blended into the environment that it was in, right? Instead of making it some god-awful color, right?
Yeah.
And people were very receptive to that idea, and they just didn't know really how you would go about it. As the company grew, or whatever you want to say, as people got to know us, we were a good bet to fix their house. And I ended up on Black Point, and that's the very wealthy area of Diamond Head. And there was this 3-story solid blue rock, Hawaiian blue rock, Tudor style house that belonged to the Vivases, and they owned Angel Flight. Now that'll take you back a ways. So I'm up there painting. I had to do this one by myself because they kind of insisted, and it had to be, the paint that was on it had to be ground down to nothing. And I will be laboring this story because that's why I was up on a scaffolding 3 floors high, and hot Hawaiian weather, right? And I see this guy cruising by, running by, because there's a surf break right down the street. And he's running by, and every day he had a different surfboard. And I'm thinking to myself, geez, that's kind of odd, you know? Plus, I was jealous that he's going surfing and I have to wait till after work or something. Anyway, one of these times I just hollered down to him. His name was Steve Wilson, and the family lived just down the street. He had a shaping room and built these boards right there in Black Point. And I thought, you know, hey, why not get a new surfboard, you know? Anyways, I ordered a couple boards from him. We became friends, talked about it. And I kind of gave him the idea of, you know, we should open a shop. That's exactly how the two of us, all the cards were against us, because he didn't, his family had money, but he didn't have money. And I had only what I was earning in the painting company. We had to start it from a real shoestring. But we can't be a shoestring in the location. We had to have a nice, in order to get started, we really needed to be where the surfboard stores were. We found the perfect location. Was a bar before we got there. It was right on Kapiolani Boulevard, main drag. Everybody's going by, you know.
Yeah.
And we had window facing the street. But at that time, we didn't have inventory. And there was no money once we paid the first and last month's rent. So we went around to our friends and see if they had anything on consignment, you know. We could get some used surfboards in there or something. We got 2,000 square feet, you know.
It's a lot of
space. So we just had to kind of figure it out. And at the same time, Steve was connected to some people that had you wouldn't call it a factory, but a place to build a few more boards, and then in his house in the garage, right? We worked that out so he could go and start building boards and I could run the store, right? Yeah, so that's how it went for quite a while.
1978 is when you opened?
That's September
store
1970.
Ala Moana.
Right.
How long of a period did you have the store for?
We were there on Kapiolani for 4 years, maybe.
Okay.
Not very long. There's a story there. What ended up happening was one day I'm in the store, and this contingent, this Japanese contingent showed up, and there were maybe 10 or 12 of them. One was obviously the boss. There were 2 interpreters and then his entourage, right? And he wanted to order 1,000 surfboards. He wanted to license my name in Japan. He wanted to build a surf industry in Japan.
Okay.
And he was actually a wealthy, more along the line, he would get brands, but more along the lines of fashion. Fashion brands. And there's a magazine out there with our picture on the cover, and you see Tropical Blends on a fashion magazine. What he was telling me was he wanted to open a large $1 million surf shop in a really nice area. I was a little bit pushed back because he shows up with all these things made with my brand on it already.
Oh, right. You kind of,
You know, towels and and combs and little bags for your keys and sweatshirts, and all of it had my logos on it, right?
he took the liberty with that, asking whether or not you could put your logo on it.
Exactly.
Right.
Kind of horse before the cart.
Sure, sure.
Anyway, so I kind of backed off on it a little bit, but he invited me to Japan many times. And in the beginning, there was a lot of feeling out, right? And I kind of got the sense that he was okay. But of course, I told him that there's no way we can provide him 1,000 surfboards. He's going to need to wait for us to build a factory. We can do, 20 here, 15 there. And I said, also, we're going to have to have our lawyers involved, and you're going to have to put up letters of credit, and all that's going to have to be legitimate, right? And he did all that.
So at this point, you were shaping boards.
I didn't shape.
Okay, so
Steve was shaping
okay,
boards.
Steve was shaping.
Steve was the surfboard side of it, the manufacturing side. I was the retail side.
Got you.
There was some internal misunderstandings, as young people will have from time to time. And, there was accusations made that were completely unfounded, because I was going to Japan all the time. And why would I be driving a Porsche and he's, riding his bicycle to the factory? Of course, I had the Porsche before I ever showed up. But anyway, so by the time that worked out, there were some legal difficulties, and he needed to give me his half because he made some errors. And so I ended up owning Tropical Blends entirely at that point.
Okay.
And
early 80s.
Yeah, early 80s. Then the next thing that happened was I was trying to promote our brand. Our brand went very quickly. I mean, we went from nothing to quite a bit in a very short period. And it wasn't only from the Japanese, it was people coming to our store. And I had really good airbrush artists, this kind of stuff way ahead of its time. We specialized in the color and the beauty, and picked the right people to shape boards for me. Steve was one of them, but there were others.
Could you name some of those that we would recognize?
Ken Bradshaw, Steve Walden. Almost everybody around worked for Tropical Blends at one time or another.
Insane.
And because we did actually build a full-fledged factory. Matter of fact, Ed Angulo, I don't know if you know that name.
Yes, Josh Angulo's
father. Yeah, Ed Angulo built the factory for us.
Great.
And so I was busily trying to promote the advertising side. At that point, video was just, VHS and beta were just coming on the market, And it just turned out that one of my team, Keiki team, the young team, this guy's father, Bob O'Connor, was opening the only and first video store in Honolulu. And it was right down the street from our shop. So I took a big interest I went over to meet him, really nice guy. I've been helping his kid for a while, so I was welcome there. And I started learning a little bit about what was going on. And then a Japanese guy comes into my store, straight from Japan, and he just filmed surfing at the North Shore that 2 hours before, and here he is showing it to me on a screen. And it wasn't a VHS or beta. It was really quality, clear stuff, right? And I'm going, wow, what the heck are you doing? You move to a 3/4 inch format, and then everything starts getting really more clear, right? Interestingly enough, he was one of these wayward kind of guys. And I said, I've got a 4-bedroom house if you need a place to stay for a few days. And we sort of hooked up, and it was really, really a place where the key turned. What I had been doing before that was I got a regular camera, just a regular VH home movie camera from Bob O'Connor, and I took it down to Magic Island. And Magic Island, with the Bombora surf break is right there. You can get a really, really close shot of the kids that were on my team. And of course, had a screen, a television screen mounted in the wall in my store, and that was also in 1979 or so, way ahead of its time. So the kids would come after school, the high schools were around, and they would just fill up the place with sitting there looking at, and oh, that's Joey, that's really, and everyone would tell me, well, they're just not buying anything. Yeah, well, just wait. Christmas time, here comes mom and dad, or just mom, or whatever, right? Or they'd buy a bar of wax, or they'd buy a magazine, or they'd buy a leash or something, right? So that investment started turning into more boards. And I don't
So
know,
you created a community essentially.
basically, and this is way before that genre's time. Do you know who Peter Cabrinha is?
Cabrinha, as in the kite surfing
That
company.
the kite surfing magnate.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, he was one of my team riders.
Oh, really? As
Yeah,
a kid?
as a kid.
As a Grom?
As a Grom. To this day, I still communicate with Peter.
And
I wanted to carry kiteboards, wings, and the foils here. And I actually ordered a bunch of stuff, and I wanted to do it myself, so I went and tried. It's not as easy as you think.
No, it really isn't. I think we've all given it a little crack.
Yeah.
And like you coming from a surf background, it's a completely different discipline.
Well, it would be nice if you had a jet ski or something to teach you how to use it in the first place.
Yeah.
But you're trying to use a wing, and you've got it on your stand-up paddleboard, and you're trying to hold it and hold this, and yeah.
Interesting. So you drew your inspiration from essentially the going back to the creative side of tropical blends. You drew your inspiration from Hawaii and what it stands for, the colors that you experienced. The minute I was in Hawaii in June this year for the first time in my life.
Right.
And as a young surfer from South Africa, it's kind of one of those places that you always aspire to dream of going.
Yeah.
Because of films like The North Shore and
Right.
watching Hawaii 9-1 and 9-0 and watching Sonny Garcias of the world and the Johnny Boy Gomes. And this is my generation.
Lisa Quezon, do you know who
Yes.
that is? She was one of my Broms.
Ah, there we go.
So there's one that,
The Quezon.
oh, I forgot to mention the Moniz kids. I sponsored all the Moniz kids. So
Oh, really?
Josh and who's the one that's Seth?
Seth Moniz.
Yeah, they were my Groms. They were my neighbors too. Tony and I go back a long ways.
There we go.
And yeah,
These names will come. And so getting to Hawaii, the minute you step off the airplane, you
feel the air.
feel the air.
Do you feel the air on your body?
Yeah.
You feel almost
And your senses are awoken to the smell of the island.
There's no doubt.
And then you go outside and then you start to see what you've been describing, the colors of Hawaii. And you go down to Waikiki and to Queens Beach, and
Still the colors are there.
there.
Even with all the people and whatever.
Yeah.
The beauty that captures you as far as Hawaii is concerned, even Honolulu, the beauty is there.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate they've built all the infrastructure and all the support stuff that is a barrier to getting to the beauty.
Yeah.
If that makes sense to you.
That does.
And also the other thing is too, I was raised with aloha was a Hawaiian way of life. You go down the street, you say good morning, aloha, how's it? As I said earlier, you're carrying your boards home, and auntie and uncle there was always some kind of a food kiosk on the way. Sometimes it was in a building, sometimes it's on a cart on the road, whatever. And every single time auntie would say to you, you boys, hey, you take a break, because you see two little young guys, the grommets, carrying these things in. And then she would pull out, she'd get, hey, hungry, and she'd pull out get a big scoop of rice and then put some gravy from the hamburger steak is what we called it. Yeah, gravy and rice. And you're 14 years old, you just grind that, right? And anyway, the ambience is really, you're right, what formed my life all the way from the beginning, right? I tried the best that I could all the time to be true to that goal. Talk straight. What you say to people is what they're going to get. That's a Hawaiian trait, right? You don't become the haole that says things. Okay, I'll tell it to you a different way. We're called haoles, right? And what does that word mean, haole, right? Well, to my understanding from my Hawaiian friends, there's a word called haole. And haole is speaking with breath. And now sharing breath is a cultural thing with the Hawaiian people, Polynesians. You stick your foreheads together and you share the same breath, because breath is life. And that means something. Europeans, Caucasian people, they shake hands because they want to make sure that the other one doesn't know they have a weapon in their hand. This is a completely different thought, right?
Mindset. Yeah.
And so what happens when you tell your Hawaiian friend that you're going to go fishing with him on Tuesday at 3 o'clock or after he's tended his fields, right? And this would be an obligation that you've made, right? And you don't show up. And that's becomes, well, that person doesn't speak with breath, isn't really a real person in our world, in our culture, right? So it becomes almost like liar. They promise, the people come and they promise them things, they're indigenous people, and we're going to do this for you and that for you and whatever. And you don't come through, and it appears that you're just there to take, right? Take. And that message resonates, especially with where I was raised. There's a Hawaiian homestead up on the top of Makiki. It's called Papakolea. And I lived like just under Papakolea. So all the people I went to school with were all Hawaiian. I was a minority growing up. So there was maybe 6, 7 Caucasian people in the school. Yeah, so anyway, that formed all these cultural standards, I suppose.
Yes.
And you were alluding to the colors and whatever, but there's way more. It's a lot deeper than that, right? And the acceptance from the Hawaiian people, you go home with your friends, and they didn't know haole until you were 14 years old, and it was always, hey, Jim, you looking at my girlfriend, you fucking haole. Why you looking at my girlfriend? And I said, dude, I don't even know who your girlfriend is, right? And why would I look at her anyway? Because I don't know, but that's home talking, right? That's mom and dad having some grouch with somebody about something, and they bring it. And then you become haole, And so from then on, until you get into your 40s and 50s, you're fucking haole. And so that's a component that you have to kind of work with in Hawaii, especially if you're talking about surf shop and whatever. And I felt I was always fortunate enough that my roots, my upbringing was solid. So I was part of the community, and it was easy for me to kind of build on that.
It's interesting. And I think for the viewers who don't know, we see the veneer of Hawaii. And I don't mean that disrespectfully.
No, it's true.
We see the veneer, we see the bright colors and the white sandy beaches. But when you sit and talk story with Hawaiian people, that's when you get to understand the depth of the
Culture itself.
The culture and the closeness to the land. Because I've had some beautiful conversations with some of the local people on the podcasts, and they've really educated me as to how much of their respect, their beliefs, their relationships with other people are born of their love for their island.
It's real.
Yeah.
It's the only way I can describe it to you. I would go home with these kids at lunch or something, and auntie it's everyone's auntie, right? Auntie would just say, boy, you too skinny. Get up to the table over here. And I have a lifetime of that. It's just so amazing. And then things change as more people show up, and that piece starts to move back. And in order to find that piece, you have to have the connections to be that piece, right? It's a veneer. It disappears into the backgrounds because everybody's so busy with the tourists coming and making a living and whatever.
But yeah, before we get to Taiwan, you spoke about this time when you kind of, besides the shop, you had this creative outlet of videography,
international sports
photography, international sports productions was your...
Yeah, basically what I did is I turned my team coverage into international television, which is really a kind of a weird transition. However, because of my contact with Bob O'Connor, he ordered some 3/4-inch editing because he wanted to be forefront in the community. He didn't know, nobody knew how to use it. So I would go over there in the evenings, and I would just take the manual, video in, video out, and pretty soon I was the only one that could operate that. So then he's calling me, I've got a customer who wants to do that, blah, blah, can you be the editor here? And then in the evenings, I'm starting to edit, Eventually, I ended up buying that system from him, putting it in my house, putting it in my apartment. And I had a dedicated room to my editing projects, right? The other part of it was video was really new. And so the television stations and such were really anxious to get footage from the North Shore that they didn't have to send a union crew to cover. However, bringing it to them video was not what their norm was. So I had to figure out how to package this stuff and how to capture images from Sunset Beach, which is, nearly a quarter mile away, right? And so I used my Japanese contacts to go to Nikon and to go to Sony, the Sony facilities in Tokyo. And the Sony place got me hooked up with the correct gear. And it turned out that the boss of this program for buying surfboards and representing tropical blends in Taiwan bought that as a gift for me and sent it to our shop. So I got his giant crate that came to my shop, and so from Sony, directly from Sony, and Mr. Yamada-san was, they have a thing when they do the amount of business they want to do, the gift they have to give you is, anyway. So this stuff showed up, and I started, then I got with Bob, and I got the editing equipment. Now I had the cameras, the recorders, the whole 9 yards. So the next step was taking footage of the events in the North Shore, which required my time to go out there and spend the time. And Randy Rarick is a pretty well-known name in Hawaii. I knew Randy Rarick since high school times. Randy was always the contest director, so of course I was always interacting with Randy in order to, is it cool that I shoot? Can I take that? I take it to the station. It's good for them, right? The other one was Fred Hemmings, and Fred Hemmings was the producer of the events, right? The owner of the events. And I got to know Fred real well, all of them. And my contributions, allowing people that they've never seen before on the same day, what's going on at the North Shore with the Dukanamoku contest or whatever, right?
Yep.
So video by Jim Hayes, and then the whole thing of waiting at the back door for somebody to invite you in. Turned out another one of my teen kids, Ray Muse, his son, he worked at Channel 9 at the V station, right?
Yeah.
And he was a film guy, right? And he's the one that opened the door for me because he saw what I was doing down at the store, and his son was. So all that team stuff comes back in a giant circle. It's
amazing.
Yeah, it's
So
amazing.
It's like started to sort of dovetail.
Yeah,
all your connections came together as a puzzle.
dovetail is really a good explanation. It just started to come together, and so I'm thinking, okay, well, now I know Randy and Fred are talking about the ISP, International Surfing Professional, right? So I'm talking with Randy about it, and what do you think? I come along, I show up at these events. This was the very beginning of pro surfing, as far as I know, as far as a tour is concerned. And I show up at the events and I document, and I can make some kind of video to try to make money for myself and then promote them at the same time. And that seemed to fly pretty well. And then, of course, I met Ian Cairns and all the rest of the crew and the other side, and then it became ASP, and then Ian was in charge. And Ian and I did several projects together, a training series, because Ian was big into California programs for training young surfers, high school and then beyond, right? It was called Progressive Surfing Techniques. So they start you from the ground in these tapes and then go all the way to, you want to surf your first contest, right?
Incredible.
And who participated in that? Tommy Curran, Murray, his wife, people that were in the industry. Tom Curran was world champion at the time.
Yeah.
Stewart.
Yes, Mike Stewart.
Mike Stewart participated on the bodyboard section. It was really, really a cool thing then. And then I decided with the ASP's blessing that we would do an ASP video magazine, right? And that way we could actually tell people what's like, make it a monthly delivery, if you will, something that they could count on coming. And then it was $39.95 per tape, right?
Yeah.
And so then that sort of snowballed into Thorny EMI Video. Do you know Thorny EMI?
No?
Music, EMI Music.
Oh, EMI. Yes.
Yeah. Thorny EMI is Australia, and they are international film and music people.
For sure.
So they contact me, and they want to do a series of 12 tapes for Australia. And then Thorny and Mike contacts me from New York, and they want to do something, right? And George Michael Sports Machine, and then it was ESPN. ESPN was not interested in what they called third world sports until they saw Hawaii. And I'm telling you, that was a rolling the ball uphill for sure. Because the guys that I were working with, they went and sat in the office from opening time until everybody went home. And only was the receptionist that said, if you leave the tape here, I'll make sure one of the night people looks at it. And the phone rings, Marty Ehrlich. Marty Ehrlich calls a little later in the evening, 8:30. Can you guys come back down here? So that was the beginning of the first shows on ESPN.
Wow.
And that was a trade deal. You know, they didn't want to put any money in it. But they wanted to attract younger advertising companies, you know, Pepsi and those kind of things.
Incredible how that just
it just keeps going.
Yeah.
I mean, it just literally keeps going, and so you wonder where's my head all this time, right? And what thing? And I'm doing all of these different things. The video, the ESPN thing is interesting to stay on for just a second more, because I had no idea about signing a contract with a major network. They were cable at the time, but still that's ESPN, right? And so what they did was get me to sign the contract, and then I found out that they had 3 or 4 pages attached that you cannot approach these people for advertising. So how do I pay for the show? You know, I got 40, 50 grand in that show, and how do I pay for it? So I'm a little low there for a few minutes, right? And then I remember that I only used a fraction of the footage that I had in the tapes, right? I had 500 hours of footage, right? So let's go back to the well. Lock myself in my room with the editing equipment and just edit up programs and capture the outtakes for all these things, right? It was still enough surfing to make them interesting. And then I told them, okay, well, I get 3 commercials every airing. And they aired it 47 times over the summer, twice actually. So my 3 commercials showed up in those 20 million homes that they went to, right? And that was get the surfing. And I made the commercials in the same places where I cut the actual movies, right?
It's incredible.
And I just went, okay, so now we need to start making videos. Now, are we going to go pay somebody to do that? No, I had an office in Hualien, and I started buying recording machines. I started off with 10, and my wife and I made at least 6 trips a day to the post office. Fortunately, it was very close, right nearby. And we designed the packaging, we built the packaging, we got the boxes, we did the whole 9 yards. And it was completely down home.
Yeah.
I got pictures of it. It's in one of your clips that I sent you. Anyway,
VHS tapes.
Yeah, or beta. Doesn't matter which one do you want.
Yeah.
$39.95. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Take it back. $29.95. $29.95.
Lots and lots of tapes.
Lots of tapes.
How many are we talking?
So my concern about how do I make my money back was quickly fading.
Sure.
We made well over $100,000 in videotape sales from those shows on ESPN.
That's incredible.
And then, of course, that international sports production was advertised on every one of these things. So that meant other companies started getting wind of what we were doing. And you got to admit, the surfing niche was pretty small. And so I became the surf. There was a couple other ones in California, Datacom or something. There was a couple of others that compete. I thought we were competing.
Yeah.
And eventually, as I moved on to other things, they ended up filling the void. But I was definitely the first. You know, not that that's important, but
everyone was scratching to make a buck, and they were looking for new trends that were obviously successful.
And surfing is and has been. And not to mention the relationships I was building with all the surfers. Barton Lynch, Glenn Wenton and Barton Lynch and myself flew on the same flight from Honolulu to to Durban. And we got to Durban, and the freaking place is closed. And so there's 3 of us, 3 white boys standing there, right? So, okay, hey, I'm this and I'm okay. And so we go to get the baggage. And Barton's board bag had literally wheel tracks over it. And the guy's busily saying he didn't pack it well enough and blah, blah, blah. So by this time it's late, you know, I've got, I told you, 80 kilos of rolling bags and all this stuff. So I was always a show by myself, right?
Yeah.
So they helped me get up. We helped each other. We got to the Elingani Hotel, the fancy hotel in Durban, and checked in. And none of us had enough money. We just thought, okay, we share a room. And Barton Lynch and myself, we talked all night because I was interested in what prompts somebody to come onto the tour. I mean, you were doing just fine, Manly Beach, and you're sponsored by Aloha Surfboards. And well, why would you want to? He said, I didn't want to. But my sponsor asked me to do this, right? And so Barton Lynch is a very intellectual person. He's very bright. And so he massaged it around in a way that it would be good for him, good for them, good for everybody. Okay. So, but he had no intention of being world champion. I mean, not that night, I tell you that.
Yeah.
And then I also had the whole Hawaiian team. And we're in South Africa, in Durban, and you know, their color is a little darker than what should be, according to them, apartheid in those days. So we want to go see a movie, right? And no, the Dane Kealoha is way too dark. He can't come in. And so I'm getting like, it's starting to be like, really, hey, we're Hawaiian people. We're not part of your apartheid or any of that. And some of that apartheid stuff really made me embarrassed to be white, you know. I needed somebody to help me carry stuff on the beach, you know. And I'm not even sure now how it was introduced, but 17-year-old African boy, you know, really, really nice kid, right? And I I have my recording unit cabled, tethered to my back of my camera. And I'd be going along and then like that, right? And I go, whoa, dude, you got to keep up. He said, I'm not welcome here. I'm not supposed to be here. And I said, you're with me. Come right here. You know, and Peter Burness was running the contest and I was doing things for them. And I don't want to hear anything about this guy can't help me, right? And you know, I saw things that really disturbed me, you know, and I actually spent some time because I had things that I've been collecting on these from the two events, you know, T-shirts and hats and just the paraphernalia, and I wanted to give them to this kid, but I also wanted to find out what his story was, right? So I had some really interesting talks with the people there, and it took me back to home because, as I said, I was raised as a minority, and very much it was very recognizable that I was a fucking haole, right? Which didn't change until I became uncle. But at any rate, so South Africa was a really interesting experience, and the whole thing just started gelling. And I'd go from one place, and I'm coming back next year, right?
Yeah.
So the people at the television stations, the Australian news, all those people know me. So then ultimately what happened is Fred Hemmings wanted to bail out, and for the first year, I actually bought all the rights to the Hawaii events.
Okay.
So you weren't allowed to film unless you came and got permission from or paid us or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I owned those events, and ultimately Fred sold, and I brokered the deal to who he sold it to. So the guy who bought it put me in as, you know, installed me as the president of the Triple Crown company. So my job was then to write and develop the sponsorship packages and how to structure it, how many tiers and how much money we could, you know, that was, and then Randy ended up being still the contest director. Randy wasn't as excited about that as he might have been, because I'm sure he watched himself to go in that position after Fred, which ultimately happened. But this guy didn't know Randy as well as he knew me, and he wanted to work out of my office and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so there was a lot of interesting time on the video. And I forgot to mention the Eddie Aikau Invitational. There's another place where it comes in. I told you about Ray Muse earlier, and his son. Well, they live on the side of the hill or right below Papukulea, and there's a graveyard there. And the Aikau family lives and maintains and operates that cemetery. And Mew's house was right across the street. And of course, I know Eddie from the Eddie and Clyde used to come out to the country all the time. And I know Pops from the van that he drove a utility truck that had the doors that came up on the side. And you always knew when Eddie and Clyde were there. And we went to the same high school, right? So when it came to the ADI cow in Eddie's benefit, I just went to Pops and said, can I film it for Quicksilver and then pay him to do it? So I actually covered the first ADI Cow Invitational. That was
Very cool.
another story that's close to home, right?
Yeah.
And
That's quite a privilege to be able to have.
yeah, I mean, there's just, and the people at Quicksilver, I never was a Quicksilver guy, I never was a Billabong guy, even though.
Tommy Carroll and
Well, Tommy Carroll was always an interesting person. He was never very friendly, but the guy was fit and he exercised ceaselessly and he ate well and he didn't go chase the girls, and he was a serious competitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was an amazing athlete.
He still is, actually. He's
For
still
sure.
still online.
And he's been through a lot.
Yeah.
I've interviewed both. I was with Barton Lynch at his house in Sunset now in June.
Yeah.
And I had a good interview with him. And
The bearded boy.
he's still there. He's in that house that he bought with Aaron Chang 25 years ago in that little cottage.
Yeah.
And I've interviewed Tommy Carroll.
And did you see the intellect? The guy is sharp.
Oh, we had a beautiful conversation.
He's really
And he's
a special person.
very special, very special. And he's a spade kind of guy.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Down the line,
No doubt.
straight shooter should have.
But the thing is, the thing I like about sorry, my wife tells me all the time, well, you're just working with surfers, so if you really got to get a grip on that, right? Barton Lynch is not just a surfer.
No, by no means.
He's way more.
Mm.
And there's a few of them that are more, I was around Martin Potter quite a bit growing up, right? And he came solid, I don't even know what he does today other than I see him once in a while on the television. But
Sean Thompson, also a fierce competitor, athlete.
Yeah.
Strict regime.
I never liked Sean much, even though we worked together. He was hosting a few of my shows.
Yeah.
Because he went after my girlfriend.
Really?
Yeah. Sean the Prawn. Hey, Sean could literally, when we arrived.
Hey, Harley, you looking at my girlfriend?
Yeah, I should have said that, but I didn't, because I just kind of held it against my girlfriend. I mean, Sean's just there to do what Sean does, right? But it was really weird going to these different countries and arriving before so that I could be covering them coming in. And literally the girls are lined up all in their best, who's number one coming off who's the number one? Who's leading the chase right now?
Yeah.
And it was like, boom. I just go, geez, these guys, young guys, just pick and choose, whatever.
Interesting. And I was now in Bali with Jim Banks.
Oh, okay.
And I interviewed Jim, and we spoke about his first heat in 1978 and where he beat Mark Richards, 4-time world champ, in that heat. And that kind of just kickstarted his career as a pro surfer. And then he was only around for about 4 years. And then he was like, I'm out of here. I'm going to go and explore the world, kind of thing. So very interesting. Also another very deep, not just a surfboard shaper.
Yeah.
Not
there's
just a surfer.
like I said, there's a few of them. There's a bunch of them that are just surface. And
Matt George.
Yeah, Matt George.
I interviewed Matt George.
Yeah. How about busting down the door?
There we go.
So where was I in that scene?
Where were you, Jim?
Ian Cairns was staying at my house, riding around in my car with a sawed-off shotgun in the backseat.
Oh my word!
Yeah,
there we go.
That's where I was.
And your shotgun, though?
No, it wasn't mine. No, I don't know where Ian got it, but Ian was afraid for his life, and he's a big boy. And I thought that God loved Mark Richards, that he acted like a regular human being the whole time. Who's the other one that's the yo-yo that's part of that group? The pink guy. The pink guy. He pink surfboard and always.
Well, Sean Thompson had.
No, well, Sean Thompson.
He has the pink.
But he wasn't part of the Bronze Aussie.
No, true.
The Bronze
Rabbit
Aussie.
Bartholomew.
No, Rabbit was okay.
Yeah, he was all right.
There's one more.
Yes.
And what
No,
the hell's his name?
before Gary Elkerton.
Yeah, no.
Kong, not Gary. Oldman.
No, Kong was a character too.
Yeah, yeah.
And he fits the name.
We'll get it.
There's one more that's part of the Bronze Aussie. He's in that film too. And that guy was just, oh, we're cool, we're
Yeah.
Australia, and they just don't understand the Hawaii way. You don't come to Hawaii and tell them that their wave, that you're way powerful over their waves. It's just,
Yeah.
why would you go shit in somebody's backyard,
Disrespectful. And then
Totally.
one can understand why the Hui.
Very Kainapuni. There's another guy that's just larger than life, as honest as the day goes long, and just super people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's no wonder the Hui kind of had to put a few in check.
Well, the
Few-
Hui is another
A
story.
few of those Aussies.
Sorry.
Can
We can go, just take me back where you want to go.
we get on to Taiwan, please?
Yeah, Taiwan. How did Taiwan?
Why Taiwan?
Why Taiwan?
And how Taiwan?
My brother was on a wanderlust from Hawaii, and as the story goes, came through here and decided needed a little cash, so he would find out about this teaching English thing. And he found a bushiban that he could learn some English teach some English and make some money. And so he could go on to the next spot, right? And then he went to Japan and he did his thing in Japan for a while. And then he remembered about Taiwan and he came back. And that was 30 years ago. And he ended up at the Hualien County University, the Marine University in Geelong, as a professor. Now he's no longer bushiban teaching, because he had a degree and he had all the credentials to be a full-fledged instructor. And he was on their payroll for 10 or 15 years, whatever. Anyway, during that time, of course, that's my brother, my wife, and I take a short trip. Hawaii is so expensive and so hard to make it. I'd go on surf trips and that would be the extent. Now, I can't go visit Dennis because I got a store to run, right? And anyway, the times that we did come over, we were in Geelong. And there was no real impression that I had other than it's a big city and a lot of people and it's a foreign country and it's cool, but I got other things to do, So at that time, the beaches were pretty well closed because the government was figuring China was coming any day. I guess.
Military.
Yeah. So at any rate, what changed that? We came several times and there was just no draw, really. I had friends in Ecuador. My aim was to go join them in Ecuador when I was ready to retire or whatever. And, Ecuador is one of those places that it's the haves and the have-nots. And that's really blatantly in your face. And these friends of mine, of course, they're in the have category and they have a gated thing and whatever. But when you talk about crime and all that, my wife wasn't impressed. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And she said to me many times that we discussed it, if you're moving down because the surf is good and I have friends and whatever, well, I'll come down and visit you. Don't worry about it. We've been married 40 whatever years. So, it always was kind of, I don't think that's going to happen. So we're back to Taiwan. Sorry, I digressed. The change was that Daniel Jones, Mikala Jones's younger brother, surfed. He was one of my team riders. Daniel was invited to go on a magazine trip to Taiwan. And of course, they're going to Kinding or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, he told me about the trip. Daniel's not an overly talkative person, but he told me that first of all, there's nobody surfing there. That's number one. Number two is you'll see a little group of people there, but you look over here and there's absolutely great waves, but nobody's there.
What year was this?
Let me think for a second.
2016.
Yeah, 2016, 2015. And then I had a couple of customers, older guys, again, underspoken. They don't talk much. And they would say, yeah, we've been going to Taiwan for a while. And we follow the typhoons, but we go to the East Coast. We don't go anywhere. Any of that, we don't want it. But they find a sandy beach. And, even when the beaches are closed, they go out this way and they said nobody's concerned about that, right? So they just go surfing and lay on the beach. And food is good, the beer is good, So I hear about that, right? and I hadn't explored the East Coast. And then I have my team riders making a second trip there, and it's even more interesting, right? And so I think, you know what, maybe I ought to just grab my boards and my friend, and we ought to go there on a surf trip. My brother picks me up in Taipei, and we come down the coast, and we're just going to explore this side of the island for surfing. Really, I ended up here because my brother moved here. When they asked him to retire because of his age, you can't work past a certain age. The government here gave him his permanent residency because of his contribution to the society here, which is a pretty major thing, right? So he was all set, right? And he had some retirement, whatever. Anyway, so he picks me up in Taipei, and my friend and I go on up the coast, and I'm here because this is where he lived. And he takes me to the dump. I don't know if you've been to Wambao yet, but at any rate, I'm just going, wow, this is what we have here? And this is, I don't know, really, there must be better than this here. So we just kept going, and we ended up in Jinsun. And after Jichi, which there were some waves at Jichi, which actually looked fun, but it was longboard stuff, and we were looking for something else. Anyway, we ended up in Jinsun, and so waves were fun, and the people were super cool. I mean, I had a really nice community, Yinzamin atmosphere, very much like what I'm used to at home, right? That Hawaiian under the ground. These are the people that care about each other
Community.
and make the good food, and this is where I want to be. I like this, and even their faces remind me of home, and the way their interests, Any rate, so I just fell in love with that, and I thought, wow, there's only 5 people here, and they're all really unreal people. This is a cool place, And then a van showed up, and I'm not exaggerating, 7 to 10 surfers got out, came from somewhere. I saw the community, I saw the scene, and it made me start thinking. So I went home, talked to my wife, and within a couple months, I flew her over here, and we did the coast driving, no surfing, just showing her around. And she was very enamored with this coast on this side reminds me of Waimanalo, that eastern side of the island where it's very slow, and it's green like this. And there's so many signals from home, right? And then I realized I started riding my bike here because my brother's a big rider, and I love riding. So we rode everywhere around
When
here.
you say your bike, what sort of a bike?
I got 3 of them out there on the
Yeah,
track. Road bikes. Cool. Anyway, so we're pedaling all over the place. We pedaled from here to Taidong, 182 kilometers as a part of a group. Anyway, the more I got to know the place, and the more I understood what was here. If you ride a bike, this place is heaven. Oh my gosh. And I started really being impressed with the government. I've never felt any more freedom anywhere in my life than here.
Wow.
I don't care what you want to say about America, but the police are freaking a gang, and they're there to enforce their will, no matter what. Here, unless you did something to deserve their attention, right? They're not here they're here to support you.
Yeah.
Which is as it should be.
To serve you.
Yeah, well, it's not even, I wouldn't say serve, I would just say to help you, if a situation arises that's somehow different.
Protect you.
And protect you, and to just kind of keep things organized without being the freaking in your face bullshit small guy, I've got a gun syndrome.
Yeah.
I really appreciated that. I mean, I still do. I really appreciate that, because that part of it bothers me a lot in America.
So when did you decide?
Well, yeah, so I bring my wife here, we go on the trip, we go up and down the coast, and she's saying, okay, it's very cool. What do you think? And I said, okay, well, look, I don't know about you, but I'm getting tired of working, 12 hours a day, 8 days a week, 24/7. And you go to work every night working at United Airlines. And I really think that now that all the Chinese people are coming to Hawaii with their money, and they want to spend $1 million to get their green card and send their kids to school here, we just sell our house. Boom. Almost $1 million. Thank you. You can have it. Of course, our place was one of the last oceanfront places left. It was worth the trade, you know.
Mm-hmm. So that got you citizenship, essentially.
No, that got me comfort.
Got you.
Money in the bank. Don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
And actually, my Firewire sales rep, he was interested in taking over my shop.
Okay.
Yeah. So we came up with some contracts and whatever. And as we really delved into it, I went to the landlord. I still had a 10-year option on my lease. And the community where I was, Kakaako, was changing so rapidly. It was the new hip, cool place. And all the painting that went on there, and all of a sudden, all the
culture and
yeah, the whole thing was changing. And so he just said, no, I just want you to pay more money. And of course, he's Korean, and my buyer was Korean, and they just look at each other and go, this will never work out, because look, it's a rich guy, and he'll just drag it out whatever. So finally, at the last minute, I had already been here. I came first, and I rented a house 2 kilometers from here and got set up with, fortunately, I had friends that we have Wellington and his family, and we call him the mayor of Taipei.
gotcha.
I mean, he's wealthy and he's connected and whatever. And I was all ready to hire an attorney to figure out how we do all the visa paperwork. And he's the one that told me, you never deal with an attorney here, you deal with an accountant. And so what I did was, at the last minute, I called a friend of mine at American President Lines, who's one of the VPs, and I said, I need 2 containers over here pretty quickly, because my lease is going to be up, my rent's due, and boom, packed up everything in 2 40-foot containers, and off to Taiwan they went. Okay.
And you decided to open another store.
No, I didn't. That's not how it worked. Okay, so how did it work? I got the containers here. They had a freaking hell of a time figuring out what was in them. And I had to physically go to customs in Geelong and walk them through with pictures and show, because they really didn't know. And it was 5 different areas, because there was different kinds of things. What's a salad spinner? Well, a salad spinner is a $2 item you buy at Long's drugstore. But to them, how many does it take to operate it, So the long and the short of the story is I brought this stuff to the house. I rented a 3-story house over there. I brought all that shit into the house, right? And then I'm starting to figure out, all I want to do is get rid of what I have. The inventory goes, and I'm done. We'll figure out how to do the visa, investment visa or some other way, right? Then I started meeting the guys here in the water and stuff. And I cannot tell you how relieved and how impressed that I am with the community, the surfing community in this town. The people actually have found a way to really reach back and embrace surfing for what it really is. It's not a competition. It's just a fun thing to do in the afternoon, Friendly, welcome, helpful, all those attributes that
drew me
to surfing for how many years, right? I mean, why are you a surfer? Because you get to spend some time living in the moment. When you take off on that wave, there's not one thing that's in your mind except that wave in front of you. You don't remember your bills. You don't remember all that crap you carry as a human being. It's all gone. And that's what I believe draws us back again and again and again, because of the high we get from that. I believe it's a fundamental human need all the way back in our DNA. So at any rate, through a friend, I found this place, and my friend introduced me to the owner of this house, and I said, this is right on the road. You can't miss it, right? And I just took a 2-year lease and brought all that crap over here. And my goal at the time was, forget making money, forget getting rid of this stuff. Get these people on the right equipment.
There we go.
I mean, whoever brought Channel Island here, come on, they don't understand that this is not California. These waves are soft, mushy, and infrequent. So you want to be a surfer, you need something with some area that you can actually get up and not be frustrated and be splashing in the water and go, God, surfing is really hard, So you have people trained that they're going to come and they're going to say, I want to order a board. They're going to give you a deposit, give you money to order that board. Then you tell them they're going to wait for that board, and it could be 3 months, 6 months, a year. And they've never even seen that board. They've never touched it. They don't know how to surf it. And did you help them? Where's your customer service? You don't have any. Because why? You don't know. All you're in is because it's a cool business. I want to be the cool guy. I surf good, so I must be the cool guy. Sorry if that bothers people here, but it's the truth, you know, from my perspective. So first thing I wanted to do was get 80, 100 surfboards in here and have choices. You come here, you can touch it, feel it. I can educate you on why you want that and why you don't want this, right? And the same with fins. You know, you here in Taiwan, you lose a fin from your set that you paid over $100 for, and you have to go buy a brand new set. Why? Because the guy who's got the license to sell in Taiwan doesn't want to be bothered. He wants to make money. It's about money. It's not about helping the surfer. And Taiwan is not Japan. And Japan has the economy that can afford to do this. Taiwan does not have the economy. It should not be only about rich people, right? So what did I have to do? I have to dig back in my arsenal and go find all my drawings and stuff for fins and manufacture my own fins again. I know there's only 4 places in the world, and I know one of the ladies that owns the fins has moved from China. Now she's in Vietnam. And I called up Noelle and asked her, can you make fins for me? And I ordered $40,000 in fins, because if you lose one of my fins, you just come to the door and I'll just replace it. Boom, that's 4 fins, divide by 4, you owe me 950 NT. And off you go back to surfing, because that's customer service.
Yeah.
And this whole thing about you know, I sell this brand, so you can't bring it here. Well, you bought 5 boards 15 years ago, and my friend owns the company. And what does he want? He wants to sell boards here.
Yes.
How long has he known me? 35 years. If I buy from him, I'm going to sell them. I'm not going to sit on them. And I'm going to buy more because he's my friend, but also because that's what we do, you know? So NSP, Buzz Henson, I mean, you know, just a good old friend of mine. My wife helped him start the company from bringing his crap through Hawaii, right? Anyway, all these little things, you know, added up to I'm motivated to make it happen. And so how did I get my visa? I started a domestic company, domestic Taiwanese company, through my accountant, all the bells and whistles, all the accounting, all the tax paying, all that stuff, legal schmiego. And I'm operating it as a foreigner. And as a foreigner operating a domestic company, that means I'm taking a job from somebody else. There's requirements. You will meet this standard. You will make this much money. You will do this and this. And you will do it for 5 years or 6 years before we'll even consider your application for permanent residency, right? So I just busted my ass to make sure, you know, brought boards in, I educated people. I sold in this little operation here. I managed to meet all their goals and
Incredible.
and shine them up above it, right? And then when I sent in my application, boom, no questions, nothing back. You know, it was just my APRC came right just like that. Boom.
You've served the community. You've come with an intention to give back to
I
the
love
people
these
of
people.
Taiwan,
Yeah.
and to help the progression of surfing
Yes.
here in Taiwan. That is your modus operandi right now. Jim, thank you so much for your
You're
time.
more than
It's been
welcome.
an absolute pleasure. I know we've only scratched the iceberg here. Thank you for inviting us into your shop/home. We're going to flash up all the videos. All the links are going to be down below. If you're ever in this little town on the east coast of Taiwan,
Yeah, come by and visit.
come by and visit Jim. Sit down, have a chat and a talk. I'm sure you'd be more than happy to. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Aloha.